Oops, there's my charger. What's up, guys? We're going to be talking about UFC 239, which is tonight. John Jones versus Santos, which I think is going to be a really good fight. Definitely excited to see that one, to see how that one plays out. Also on the card, we got Amanda Nunes and Holly Holm, which I think will be another burner of a fight. And we also got Ben Askren is on the card fighting against Jorge Masvidal. So it's definitely going to be a really good one. Alright guys, let's go over the card here that we got for tonight's UFC. If you were just watching the prelims, the last prelim match that they had on there was Claudia Gadelha against Randa Marcos, and in that match, Claudia Gadelha beat Randa Marcos, so that's what's happened so far on this event. On the preliminary matches, I believe there's 2 more left. At the start, there was an amazing knockout by Song Yadong. There was a really good knockout in the first round in that bantamweight fight on the prelims. I know we got Gilbert Melendez fighting on the prelim card. He, I think, is the main one before the actual event starts. But let's just go over the masterpiece of this fight card tonight. We got Michael Chiesa against Diego Sanchez. Sanchez has looked really good recently in his last couple fights, so I'm interested to see what he does against a tough opponent in Michael Chiesa. That should be a really good fight for him. We got Jan Blachowicz against Luke Rockhold, which I think will also be a really good fight. Depending how that one goes, maybe one of those guys is next to challenge Jones or Santos, whoever wins tonight in this mega main event. Ben Askren is fighting on this card too. I know he won his last fight. He's fighting against Jorge Masvidal, which I think will be a really good fight. Be interesting to see how Ben Askren bounces back this time around, because the first time that he had his fight against Robbie Lawler, I think he got a little bit lucky in that one. It was like Robbie came in there and hurt him a few times, and almost looked like Robbie was ready to finish the fight at some point in that one. But we'll see how Ben Askren bounces back and what's next. But I do believe... Hey, Scooter, what's up, buddy? But I do believe that the next challenger for against Ben Askren will probably end up being the winner of the Colby Covington and Robbie Lawler fight, which I think probably Robbie Lawler will probably end up winning that one against Covington, but I could be wrong. But whoever wins that, I think will be back on, and there'll be a rematch for against Ben Askren to see who can challenge Kamaru Usman for the title. I know there's talks for Kamaru Usman possibly to face off against Tyron Woodley, so we'll see what happens with that for sure. Been a while. Absolutely, man. It's been a while. How have you been there, Scott? And now we're going forward to the 2 gems, I think, on this card would be the Amanda Nunes fight against Holly Holm. 2 really, really good strikers in Nunes and Holly Holm. Amanda Nunes has basically came in there and she's ran through a lot of the opponents that she's faced so far. But I think Holly is a good test for Amanda Nunes to see exactly where her striking is at this time in the game. So definitely interested to see how that goes. Sorry to hear that there's Scott. Yeah, definitely excited to see how that goes with Nunes and Holly Holm. To me, Amanda Nunes, I think, is probably the best pound-for-pound female fighter in the UFC. There's really nobody close to touching Amanda Nunes, I think, in the women's bantamweight division. But I mean, even the other one, there's some good divisional fighters in up and coming, like Claudia Gadelha is climbing back up that ladder again. Maybe she gets the next shot after Weili Zhang's title defense coming up against Jessica Andrade. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see who wins that. I think Andrade maybe gets the W in that one, but it's hard to say. But then you also got Rose Namajunas in that title picture still too. She did lose, but there is always that possibility that, you know, she could get that chance at another title match again in that one. So definitely it'd be interesting to see what happens for that. Drug over. Oh, that sucks, buddy. Good for you, Scott. Good for you, buddy. And then we go to the main event here, guys, which is Jon Jones and Thiago Santos. I don't really know much about Thiago Santos. I know that he's a good striker. He's probably a really good knockout artist, but I haven't seen much of him. So this is going to be a first for me to see what Thiago Santos brings to the table against a really tough fighter in Jon Jones, who's basically ran through the whole division. And if Jon Jones wins, I mean, this has to solidify him as probably the best light heavyweight of all time in the light heavyweight division. I mean, there's been a lot of good ones like Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz and all those guys coming up, but I think Jon Jones is basically the best fighter that there is at 205. So, be interesting to see what he does if he wins this fight. Does he move up to heavyweight to challenge DC for the third fight, or does DC come down to 205 and have the trilogy fight at 205? Or does Jon Jones fight either Blachowicz or Luke Rockhold? There's a lot of options on the table for Jon Jones. But we're going to get those all cleared out, guys, for you after the event, UFC 239. I'll be back on here to let you guys know how the card went, who won all the big fights, the Jones fight, the Nunes fight, all that stuff, and talk about what's next for these fighters. So it's definitely going to be a really, really good show. But this is just basically the pregame. We're going over all the fights on the card and seeing kind of what everybody thinks of the fights on this card so far for UFC 239. That's really good, buddy. That's awesome. But yeah, guys, feel free to vote on the poll. Who's going to win? Jon Jones, Thiago Santos? What is your favorite fights that you guys see on this card tonight for UFC 239? That is awesome, though, Scott. That's really cool, buddy. Alright, I got that loading up, and whenever that loads up, I'll put that back up there. We can see how the poll went and how everybody enjoying the prelims that they're on right now on TSN here in Canada. And they're on, I believe, on ESPN Plus in the States. So if you guys have ESPN Plus, definitely check out the prelims for the UFC 239 pay-per-view. I know it's a little bit different to order the pay-per-views down there. I think you have to order the, there's like an ESPN Plus package, pay-per-view package that you have to order specifically for the event. And then you get a free ESPN Plus, whatever it comes with. I know it's completely different to order it over there than it is over here. Over here we can still just like order the event through cable TV, and it's fine. We don't have to worry about any of the subscriptions or having to get ESPN Plus, which I think is really good for us down here. I kind of like that. It sucks for a lot of the people that you have to order it through the ESPN Plus, and then I guess stream it through an app. I believe. I think that's how they're doing the pay-per-views now. But anyways, guys, tonight's pay-per-view: John Jones versus Thiago Santos. As you can see, I'm supporting Johnny Bones Jones. I've supported him for a while through this title run. I think he's a great fighter. He's probably one of the best in the 205-pound division, so definitely excited to see what he can do against Thiago Santos. If it goes the distance, I'd have to give it to Jones because of just his striking ability, and there's no other fighter that quite compares to the way that John fights. John fights a completely different way than most fighters fight, and that reach advantage that John has is incredible. For a lot of the other fighters that he faces off against, he always has that reach advantage, and he's going to have that reach advantage again tonight against a tough guy in Santos. So we'll see what happens tonight. I don't know why this is not working. Yeah, sorry this was not as entertaining as the other one. I'm going to do a better one later on. We're going to go over the event with all the matches and the winners and losers and where we think, or where I think basically, is the next step for these fighters going forward after tonight's big pay-per-view event. So definitely a lot of cool things to look forward to. Another great event from UFC. Ben Askren, as I mentioned earlier, is fighting on this card against Jorge Masvidal, which is a big fight for the welterweight division. I think Ben Askren kind of got lucky in his last fight against Robbie Lawler. But, I mean, maybe if Ben Askren wins this one and Robbie can beat Kobe Covington coming up, they get together again and they do that fight again, and then we'll get a clear-cut winner of who's next for either Tyron Woodley, if he gets the title match again, or if Kamaru Usman is going to face off against either Ben Askren or one of those other guys. So definitely it's going to be really cool to see what happens on that one. Diego Sanchez, the original Ultimate Fighter, is fighting on this card against Michael Chiesa, which I think will be a great way to open the event. Two very good fighters with two very good striking. Ground games are great on both fighters. Definitely going to be a really cool one. I'm definitely really looking forward to seeing what Diego Sanchez can do against a tough opponent in Michael Chiesa. Great way to start off the event. Then we get into Blachowicz and Luke Rockhold, which I also think will be an amazing match, seeing how that one goes. And that could determine who's next for John Jones. If it's not DC, it could be either one of those guys. Or who knows what Dana White and the UFC's got planned. Maybe if John wins tonight, maybe he goes up to face DC at heavyweight. Or maybe DC comes down and faces John at light heavyweight again for the third time. So we'll have to see what Dana White has planned for that one. Lots of really good matches coming up though in the next couple months. You know, Uriah Faber's coming back on next week. For if you have ESPN Plus, definitely check that one out. UFC's event next week is gonna be amazing. I know August is gonna be a really good one. We get DC versus Stipe Miocic 2, which would be a really good fight. Also on that card, another amazing fight that they put together with Nate Diaz taking on Anthony Pettis, which I think will be just a barn burner of a great fight with those two guys going at each other. So that's August 17th. Be sure to check that one out on pay-per-view on the ESPN Plus. It's going to be really cool to watch those two guys go at it. But what are you guys' thoughts? Who's going to win tonight? John Jones, Thiago Santos, Holly Holm? she going to upset Amanda Nunes, or is Amanda Nunes going to remain the bantamweight queen? Yeah, next week, guys, be sure to check out that one. Lad against Randamine. Uriah Faber makes his UFC return against Simon. Emmett is fighting Benil Dariush. Lots of good matches on that card. Definitely be one to check out for free on ESPN Plus. Then the week after that, on the 20th, Dos Anjos and Edwards. Olenek against Harris. Greg Hardy and Juan Adams. James Vick and Daniel Hooker. Francisco Trinaldo and Hernandez. Andre Arlovsky and Ben Rothwell. That'll be a good heavyweight scrap. I know those two haven't fought in quite a while, but that's going to be a good one. Alex Caceres in the prelims. Raquel Pennington's back on this one. Sean Elvey. Roxanne Modafferi. Ray Berg. So July 20th is going to be another great card for UFC on ESPN. So if you have ESPN Plus, definitely check that out. UFC on ESPN 4. And be sure to check out UFC on ESPN Plus 13. Durandamine versus Lad, July 13th. And then July 27th is the next pay-per-view, guys, where we have Max Holloway taking on Frankie Edgar. Cyborg against Spencer. Pantoja against... I can't even pronounce that guy's name, I apologize. Yeah, it doesn't look like a bad card on UFC 240, which I believe is from Edmonton. And then, like I said, August 3rd, Kobe Covington is going to face off against Robbie Lawler. Volkan Ozdemir is going to be in the co-main event against Ilir Latifi. We got Clay Guida, it looks like, against Jim Miller. Another really solid card for UFC on August 3rd. August 10th, we got Valentina Shevchenko returns to the Octagon to take on Liz Carmouche, which I believe will be another good fight. Shevchenko's shown a lot in her last couple fights. Definitely one of the better up-and-coming fighters in the UFC. She's won quite a bit, and it's been really good. Daniel Cormier, Stipe Miocic, again, is August 17th. Nate Diaz and Anthony Pettis, Yoel Romero, Paula Costa, Rafael Ascenso against Sandhagen, Derek Brunson is on that card, John McDessie. Lots of really good fighters on that one. That one's definitely going to be a really good card. Then, as I mentioned, on August 31st, Jessica Andrade defends her title against Weili Zhang. So we'll see what happens in that division, which is the women's strawweight division. She is the new strawweight champion, Jessica Andrade. We'll see how well she defends the title. Hopefully she can keep the title for quite a bit. And we will see what happens, what's next with Jessica Andrade, if maybe she battles against Rose Namajunas. Claudia Gadelha is moving up the ladder after her win tonight, unanimous decision. So we'll see what's next for those two guys. Then the big one will be in September. So far we got Habib Nurmagomedov against Dustin the Diamond Poirier, which I think will be an amazing fight. Khabib's basically beat everybody, so this is going to be an interesting challenge, I believe, for Khabib against Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier looked really good in his fight against, what's his name? Blanking here, sorry guys. He looked really good in his fight against Max Holloway, that's what I meant to say. Those two went to war in that fight, and Dustin showed a lot of good striking. His striking was really good. His takedown defense was second to none, and he's definitely going to need that takedown defense if he's going to be able to beat Khabib Nurmagomedov, the #1 fighter, I believe, right now in UFC. He's undefeated. He hasn't lost. Interesting challenge ahead of him. So we'll see what happens on September 7th when Poirier meets Khabib Nurmagomedov for the lightweight title. I mean, there's lots of interesting choices for Khabib too after this fight. I mean, I know George St. Pierre, as you can see up there, he wants a crack at Khabib Nurmagomedov. Dana White doesn't want George to do that again because Dana White is still upset at George St. Pierre for the last time when they went, when he won the middleweight championship from Michael Bisping. I believe that was at UFC 217 where GSP won the belt. I'm not exactly sure, but I think that was the one. He won it, but George basically didn't defend that title. He vacated the belt and then retired from the sport. So that's why Dana White doesn't want to really reward George with this next challenge, with the fight against Khabib. I know for me it's a fight I really want to see. It's two of the best UFC fighters of all time going against each other in the octagon, and it's one that I think a lot of fans would want to see. I mean, yes, the Conor McGregor fight, people want to see that. Do I think it should be right away? I think Conor should fight one more fight at least. Either fight against Tony Ferguson, fight against Cowboy, whoever it happens to be. Fight one of those guys first, win that fight, and then he can get back to the fight against Khabib. I think that makes the most sense for Conor at this point in that title picture. The George St. Pierre picture is kind of a little bit foggy. It doesn't really make too much sense. But it's a super fight that I think a lot of fans would want to see. It's a super fight that I definitely, as a fan of UFC, would love to see. To see how well Khabib can deal with GSP's takedowns and how well GSP can deal with Khabib's takedowns. And both their ground games are really good. So that would be a fight that I'd really want to see, but I don't really know if it's going to happen. It's all up to the UFC brass what they want to do with that one. If they want to move forward with that, that's great. If they don't, then we'll see what they put up next. But I think outside of those two options, the St. Pierre option and the Conor McGregor option, you kind of have to give the next shot at Khabib to Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson's ran through everybody big in that division. The only one he hasn't fought yet is Khabib, and that's just due to injuries and other foreseen circumstances that have taken him out of these fights. But he proved a lot against Donald Cowboy Cerrone, especially the win streak. Cowboy was on 4-fight win streak going into that fight against Tony Ferguson. A fight in which I was hoping Cowboy would have won because I'd really like to see him get that title shot and get one more crack at the belt before he calls it a career. But even if he doesn't, I think Cowboy's had probably one of the most remarkable careers in MMA. So definitely, I mean, hats off to him. He's a legend. He'll take any fight at any time, which I really like about Cowboy. That's probably why he's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. So it's definitely something that would be really cool to check out, to see. But Tony Ferguson definitely should get the next shot at Khabib. Pending something happens, maybe Poirier pulls out of this fight with an injury. Something happens last minute. Dana White and UFC should pretty much go to Tony, because Tony's been the guy who's should have had this title shot for a long time. He never lost the belt. He never lost it at all. He got injured. They all of a sudden went and they did a fake title, I would basically call it. And it's not really the real title. I think Tony still has the real title. It's debatable, I know for a lot of people it's debatable, but I think Tony's the real champion. He never lost it. He never lost to anybody in the last few fights, so I mean, Poirier proved a lot. He did put on a heck of a show against a tough opponent in Max Holloway, who's basically ran through his whole division. So, you know, we'll see what happens with Khabib and Dustin Poirier. We'll definitely see what happens there. Who's the better fighter? So that's basically it, guys, for this video. If you want to talk about the fights, definitely talk about the fights. I'll see if anybody else pops in here and checks it out. Well, we're talking about the UFC 239 pay-per-view. Jon Jones versus Thiago Santos is going to be one of the best. Probably a pretty solid fight, I would think. Jones has looked really good recently, so I mean, I'm going to wrap this one up super shortly, but definitely, guys, check out my post-fight show. I will be on here right after the pay-per-view. We'll be going over every fight on the card, discussing what we liked about it, the knockouts, the victories, and what's next for those potential fighters. So if you enjoy this kind of video, if you enjoy the UFC, if you enjoy just discussing the fight cards and the fights and different fights that you're excited for coming up, super fights that you'd want to see, definitely subscribe to my channel, guys. Clown3333 at the bottom. Definitely hit the subscribe button. I know people watch this on YouTube. Feel free to subscribe, and I'll add you guys all as friends. If you send me friend requests, I will add you. You can feel free to pop into the show anytime you want to. My next one will be probably around like 1 o'clock tonight. It'll be going over the fight card. So at 1 o'clock tonight, I'll be back on here to discuss the UFC 239 pay-per-view. But I'll take a few questions before I head off this and go back to the prelims to see who wins between Gilbert Melendez and his opponent. But yeah, guys, feel free to comment and let me know what your favorite fight is on this card tonight. Are you excited for Sanchez and Chiesa? Are you excited for Rockhold and Blachowicz? Are you excited for Ben Askren taking on Jorge Masvidal, which I think will be a wicked fight? Amanda Nunes, Holly Holm, which I think will be amazing. Or Thiago Santos and Jon Jones. Any one of those fights could be fight of the night. Do we see an upset for Holly Holm tonight? I don't know. Holly's striking is good, but Amanda Nunes kind of has she got like rocks in her hands. If she hits you like once or a few good shots, generally that opponent, whoever she hits, is going to sleep. So that's going to be an interesting challenge, I think, for both fighters. A challenge for Holly Holm to avoid the power shots of Amanda Nunes, and Amanda Nunes to avoid the kicks of Holly Holm. Because Holly Holm's got some devastating kicks, as you can see in her fight against Ronda Rousey. The head kick that she landed on her that put her out. Different head kicks and stuff that Holly's landed in the past that have taken out a lot of opponents. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when those two styles clash tonight on UFC 239 on pay-per-view. So if you haven't ordered it yet, guys, definitely order it now. It's about 9:30 our time. I'm not sure what time it is would be for you guys, but definitely order it now through your ESPN Plus app. I think you order it through the app and then you order it somehow like that. I'm not too sure, but definitely it's one that you won't want to miss tonight, guys, with Jon Jones and Thiago Santos. Going to be one of the greatest, one of the best fights probably so far this year. Is it on the Holloway and Poirier level? We'll have to wait and see. Because Holloway and Poirier was probably one of my favorite fights of 2019. Cowboy and Raging Al La Quinta that I seen in Ottawa for UFC Fight Night Ottawa was probably one of the best fights I've seen too. So there's been a lot of really good fight of the nights that have happened this year. A lot of good knockouts. Just last weekend, I believe it was the Francis Ngannou and Junior Dos Santos fight. Francis looks absolutely devastating at heavyweight. That one punch that he put out Dos Santos was amazing. I don't know how the UFC can overlook Francis's last 3 fights that he's won by knockout in a devastating fashion and pass him up for the next title shot. So we'll have to see what UFC does with that, but I think Francis has pretty much earned his way back to the to the title picture. I mean, you can't really take Francis out of the title picture after those 3 huge wins, especially a win over a guy in Junior Dos Santos, who's probably one of the best heavyweight strikers that the UFC's ever seen in that division. Yeah, guys, feel free to comment on what your fights you're excited for tonight. Are you getting the event? Are you excited for John Jones? Would you put John Jones as one of the best light heavyweights of all time? I know I certainly would. I know UFC is looking into possibly getting his only loss overturned against Matt Hamill for the illegal elbows. A fight in which John was winning up until that point where he hit him with those illegal 12-6 elbows, which at that time in the sport were illegal. They're still illegal now, but I mean, the UFC is desperately trying to overturn that for John. It seems to me, I don't know if it's just me because I'm a fan or whatever of John Jones, but I think John seems like a completely different guy now. He's not the same fighter as he used to be. Um, he just seems completely different in a good way. He's a more classy, more respectful version of John Jones than the old John Jones used to be. So definitely excited to see what he can do against the knockout artist in Santos. Never seen Santos fight. It's my first time seeing him fight tonight, so I'm definitely excited to see what he brings to the table, see what kind of challenges he brings for John Jones, and what kind of challenges Jones brings for Santos, because Jones does have that 84.5-inch reach advantage, which is the largest reach advantage in the UFC. So definitely going to be exciting to see what those guys can do on that show. And same with the Holly Holm fight and Amanda Nunes. Can Holly avoid the power shots of Nunes? And how is Nunes going to deal with the kicks of Holly Holm? If Holly gets her with a good leg kick or head kick, it could be the end of the night for Amanda Nunes, and we could see an upset. But I think Nunes will win, but it's probably going to be a close fight. It could be one that even goes to the scorecards possibly, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. We're almost time, guys, for the pay-per-view. It's coming up really, really soon, so definitely, if you haven't ordered it yet, definitely order it now. We'll be back on shortly. I'll take a few questions or whatever before I head off here. But I'll be back on at like 1 o'clock, and we'll discuss the whole card. We'll go over the matches. I'll let you know my favorite moments of UFC 239, favorite fights, if there's any knockouts, and what I think is next for those particular fighters. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the stream. I've already babbled on for quite a while. You can watch the full video on my YouTube page, Clown3333. But if you have any questions regarding UFC 239, what fights you're excited for, different things like that, feel free to comment. Let me know. And we'll break them down. And who's your guys' favorite UFC fighters? I know for me it's Cowboy Cerrone. He's probably one of my favorite fighters. One of the toughest nails fighters in UFC who basically he'll do any fight at any time against anybody, which that's what I really like about Cowboy. The winning streak that he's put together is amazing, so Alright guys, oh, we're getting everybody in here just as the event's ready to start shortly. Well, we're almost gonna, I'll take you guys to almost 10. We'll do a few questions and stuff like that, and we'll go from there for UFC 239, which is gonna be amazing. But join me again, guys, at 1 p.m. I believe is when the event is gonna be over. I will pop back on and I will go over the whole entire card. Break down every single fight on that card, talk about the favorite moments, what I think is next for certain fighters. I know for Ben Askren it has to probably be either the winner of Colby Covington or Robbie Lawler is, I would think, what has to be next for Ben Askren, because you can't really give the guy a title shot after the last fight against Robbie Lawler where it looked like he was almost going to go to sleep. And then he caught him with some choke that Robbie wasn't completely fully out. It was just a really weird, messed up situation. So they kind of almost have to run that back, but we'll see how Robbie does against Covington. If Robbie wins and Askren and Ben can beat Jorge Masvidal, which I think is another really tough challenge for him, then we'll see what's next for him. We'll see if he can be next to go up against Kamaru Usman. I know there was ramblings of possibly Tyron Woodley possibly getting back into the title picture. But I think for Woodley, it would be smart to have Woodley fight one more fight if he is going to be the next challenger for Kamaru Usman's title. I think that would be the smart thing for UFC to do. To have Woodley come back and maybe face the winner of Robbie Lawler or Colby Covington. Or like a Ben Askren type of fight or something like that for him. If you can get through that fight and then give him Kamaru Usman. Because, I mean, Usman did destroy Tyron Woodley when they fought. He basically cleaned the whole mat with him, so to me, the only way to do that is to have him fight one more, then do the match. It's the only thing that makes logical sense to me, being a fan and going through like what different things that I think makes the most sense in the UFC. And it's the same with the Khabib situation. When I was talking about George St. Pierre possibly maybe wanting in on that title picture, but Dana White doesn't want to put him into that title picture because when George beat Michael Bisping, which I believe was UFC 217, he won the title, but Dana White says, okay, George, you won it, but you have to defend it, and he just dropped the title. He just vacated it, and he retired. So I think that's kind of why Dana does not want to give George this other opportunity against Khabib. I mean, it would be a wicked fight for a lot of fans to see Khabib Nurmagomedov against George St. Pierre, probably two of the best welterweight fighters, or not welterweight fighters, but one of the best light heavyweight fighters against one of the best welterweight fighters. So I don't even know if George can make 155. But if he can, that would be a wicked fight. But I do agree with Dana White. I mean, he doesn't want to get burned again for having George, possibly win another belt and not defend it at that weight class. So it does make sense. Conor kind of makes sense in a way because of the feud with Khabib, but in a way it doesn't make sense because for me, I think for Conor to get back to the fight with Khabib, pending Khabib still fighting in that division, is to have either Conor fight Cowboy Cerrone, who lost to Tony Ferguson, or have Tony Ferguson fight Conor McGregor for the next title shot, because I know Cowboy still wants another rematch with Tony, which is understandable the way that match ended, where Cowboy's eye kind of blew up on him when he blew his nose in the corner when he shouldn't have, and it all swelled up and he couldn't continue, even though he wanted to, because that's just the kind of guy that Cowboy is. But that was just, it would make sense for them possibly to run that back, but for Conor, I would say either fight Tony or fight Cowboy, and whoever wins that could get the next shot at Khabib. But if you're going to go any other people that's not going to leapfrog or have any other fights to do to get to Khabib, the only one that makes logical sense at this point is Tony Ferguson. But we'll touch more on that after, guys, when I'm stream my later show at 1 o'clock. So be here, guys, at 1 o'clock. I will be streaming. I'll be talking about the fights from UFC 239. Going over the whole fight card, all the fights I liked, what I didn't like. and what's next for those fighters. But I just thought I'd go on a little bit of a rant on the Khabib situation, what I think should be next, and I think Tony should be next, pending an injury. Like, if Dustin gets injured, Tony is the only one who makes logical sense to put in that title picture against Khabib. But we'll have to wait and see what the UFC decides to do with Khabib Nurmagomedov, Tony Ferguson, Conor McGregor, whatever is next. But right now they just got to focus on Dustin Poirier and Khabib Nurmagomedov when they go to war on September 7th in Abu Dhabi. So definitely stay tuned for that one, guys, in the upcoming months. And I know August 17th is another big card. Anthony Pettis and Nate Diaz are going to be on that card. We got DC against Stipe Miocic too, which I feel is going to be another great fight. So all kinds of good fights lined up. Tonight we're focusing on UFC 239, Jones versus Santos. So take a couple of questions if you guys have any. I know there's 3 people watching, so if you have any questions about the fights tonight, let me know. If not, I'll wrap this up super quick, and we'll see you guys at 1 o'clock p.m. and we'll talk about the UFC 239 fights. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the stream. If you have any questions regarding the fight, I'll take a couple of them. Other than that, the event will be starting shortly, so if you haven't ordered it yet on pay-per-view, definitely order it now, because now's the time to get it. I got a big banger to start off the night. It's going to be Diego Sanchez, I believe, will start it off against Michael Chiesa, so that's definitely going to be a great fight, so definitely check that out, guys. Alright, guys, so thank you so much for popping in and enjoying the UFC 239 pre-show. I will be back on at 1 o'clock p.m. We'll discuss the actual UFC event. We'll discuss what's next for the different fighters and stuff like that, so tune in at 1 o'clock, guys. I will see you then. Later, man. Have a good night. I will see you guys at 1 o'clock after the event. Enjoy it. It's coming on soon. Thank you to everybody who joined tonight in the stream. And then we'll talk about the fights. So enjoy the card, guys. If you're big UFC fans, pretty much just love every fight on this card if it's good. And we will see you guys at 1 o'clock.